On behalf of all of us at SOS, I want to thank you for joining us today, as well as to those of you who are tuning in from around the province. Last October, SOS launched. It came about because residents, employees of businesses, business owners, communities, and entire neighborhoods were tired of what was going on in their communities from street crime, violence, and total disruption. When we launched, we had 30 members. Today, SOS has grown to more than 100 community organizations, business organizations, big and small, and from every corner of British Columbia. We came together to tell government that at every level that they needed to find solutions to these problems, to the deterioration, crime and violence we were experiencing in our communities. After all, governments not only have the resources, smart people, finances, the legal and legislative tools to get things done, but they have something that's really important that we as an organization, a community organization, and the public don't have. They have the responsibility to fix these things. Every day we have new groups and organizations contacting us because they're seeing that things are getting worse in BC rather than getting better. They want their families, they want their employees, they want their customers to not only be safe, but to feel safe. My co-founder of SOS and our chair is Clint Mallman, the CEO and president of London Drugs. And while operating across Canada, they're very local. They're family-owned, and they're very community-oriented, and that's why they've been so supportive of SOS. In fact, the family opened their very first store, I believe, within minutes of where we are today, 126 years ago. Their participation in SOS is another demonstration of their commitment to our community. Clint Mallman's experience and his commitment to the community around the province really does speak volumes about their concern for what we're seeing and for their support then for SOS. I'd like to invite Clint to talk to you about our province-wide survey that we've just completed and what we may hope to see come out of releasing it to you today. Clint?
Thank you, Jess, and good morning, everyone, including all of you online that are coming from all areas of the province. Jess provided a quick background on the Save Our Streets organization and society and how we started. But as we begin to look at this upcoming election, we felt it was important to make sure that the issues that resulted in the creation of SOS were forefront and part of the election debate with politicians and all the province citizens. Save Our Streets is non-political, we're a fact-based organization, and we strongly believe that issues such as crime, public safety, street disorder, open drug use, violence, and criminal and gang activity deserve to be part of this election campaign. Those issues that are impacting our streets, neighborhoods, businesses, and our lives. The fact is that today, in every corner of the province, every community, big or small, we have found themselves having their own version of the downtown east side. So we want to make sure that everyone running in this provincial election for October 19th and future federal elections understood what was on the mind of the citizens of British Columbia and the 100+ organization members of community groups and businesses of SOS. Like neighborhoods and businesses around our province, London Drugs has been hit hard by these issues, but we're not alone. In every corner of our province, crime, violence, and street disorder make all of us feel unsafe. And it's not a small business or a big business issue. It's a citizens issue. To be part of the election discussion, we felt we needed some impactful, reliable data, numbers that highlight how British Columbians are feeling and what they expect of whichever party forms government in October. To those of you that are running in the election, regardless of the party, to those operating our justice system, I'd ask you to pay very close attention to what the citizens have said and what these numbers reflect. It's not our intention to point fingers or cast blame. In fact, as we all know, we know these issues will only be solved by working together, bringing bright minds together. So we want these numbers and this data to help governments, whether they be federal, provincial, or municipal, or the elected officials or their bureaucrats, to find solutions and know, as you will see from these numbers, they have the support of the citizens of British Columbia to take action now, and on behalf of over 5 million British Columbians. In plain language, to those seeking office in this election, don't run from these numbers. Don't hide, and please don't try and deflect what they mean or justify. Focus on what's right, not who's right. Instead, consider what you hear this morning and know that British Columbians are behind you, counting on your leadership and action, not excuses. For credibility, independence, and integrity of the polling, we asked Mario Konsenko of Research Co. to work with us to pull together the right questions and the right polling information. And we reinforced to him that we wanted detailed results from all across the province and to reflect all regions accurately. And we wanted it to be an accurate, reliable poll. So here now to share the results of our province-wide poll is Mario Konsenko of Research Co. Mario?
Thank you, Clint. Thank you, everybody who's here or watching. I'm going to get to have a look at the data that we collected. We interviewed 1,200 British Columbians earlier this month, a significantly larger sample size than what is usually used for a survey of this nature. We're going to start with some stats on crime and public safety. And we asked a series of questions with statements. We have a significant level of British Columbians who believe that criminal activity in their community has increased in the past 4 years. It's at 55%. It's a number that I've tracked personally for the past few years, and this is getting to a level that is the highest that we've had before for the past 4 years. There's 74%, almost 3 out of 4 residents, who say that crime and violence are impacting the quality of life in their community. It's a significantly high number. People who fear for their own safety in their community at 50%. This is a number that climbs to 54% in Metro Vancouver. And also fearing for the safety of your family in your community, up to 57%. There are areas of my community I avoid because I fear for my safety. We had 58% of British Columbians agreeing with this message. It's a number that used to be higher in Metro Vancouver and significantly lower in other areas, but every single region that was included in the survey shows a majority of people essentially telling us that there are parts of their municipality or their community that are off limits. And 88%, almost 9 in 10 British Columbians, telling us that they believe that crimes go unreported in the province. Why do people believe that crimes go unreported? By far, the #1 reason, expressed by 2/3 of British Columbians, is a lack of confidence in the justice system. Fewer people say that reporting is too much of a hassle for victims, or lack confidence in the police, or fear retribution if they speak out. So this was one of the most eye-catching findings of the survey, to have 2 out of 3 people who believe that crimes go unreported, essentially looking at the justice system as the reason for them to feel that way. We move now into the topic of addiction. And we have 67% of British Columbians who believe that the current situation related to the use of prescription and non-prescription opioid drugs is a major problem. When I started tracking this question, the numbers were lower than 60%, so it's something that clearly has grown over the past year or so. 82% of British Columbians understand that addiction to opioids is a health issue, and we also have 75% who believe that the Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions proposed guideline for involuntary treatment is okay. Now, this is an important matter because we don't see any ideological differences within British Columbians when we look at this particular issue. It's not a situation where the NDP voter is necessarily against the guidelines or the level of support is higher among BC Liberal voters from 2020 or BC Green voters. People of all political stripes believe that this is the right course of action. We took a look at the situation as it pertains to retail and found 80% of British Columbians who think that retail crime makes products more expensive. We're in the middle of an affordability crisis with people worried about making ends meet, and 4 out of 5 understand that unless we solve this problem, the products that they need are going to be more expensive. We also have a significant proportion of British Columbians who think that 4 problems have increased in the province over the past 3 years. Shoplifting at 67%, random vandalism, such as broken windows, at 60%, and also 45% who believe that there's more acts of violence against employees, and a similar proportion who say that they see employees leaving customer-facing positions because they fear for their safety. And there's a high level of support for solutions on all of this. More than 4 in 5 British Columbians who think that all levels of government should do more to prevent all of these problems. The acts of violence against employees, random vandalism, employees leaving consumer-facing positions, and also shoplifting. Now we look at the issue of responsibility. What is to blame for the current situation regarding crime and public safety? More than anything, 88% of British Columbians say it's related to addiction and mental health issues. 81% say poverty and inequality is also to blame. 79% say gangs and the illegal drug trade. Now, when I first started asking this question back in 2010, it was usually gangs and the illegal drug trade as the #1 option on this particular indicator. Now it's down to #3 behind addiction and poverty. But 76%, again, blaming an inadequate court system. This is a number that used to be in the 50s or 60s. Now it's 76% of British Columbians who think that is one of the problems. Bad economy and unemployment at 72%, lack of values at 69%, and insufficient policing and lack of resources to combat crime at 67%. So looking into the history of tracking that we have on this particular question, the courts used to be way to the right. Fewer people saying that the courts were responsible for the problem, more people who blamed gangs and the illegal drug trade. Now we have addiction and mental issues as the #1 concern, and ultimately an inadequate court system being seen as part of the problem by 3 out of 4 British Columbians. Who is most responsible for dealing with crime and public safety? By far, British Columbians believe that this is a responsibility of the provincial government at 40%. 27% believe their municipal government is more responsible, and 23% believe that it's the federal government. Now, what happens with the justice system? Do British Columbians believe that the justice system achieves the appropriate balance between the rights of offenders and those of victims? By a 2-to-1 margin, British Columbians tell us that it doesn't. 61% believe that this is not the case. Only 30% believe that the justice system actually achieves the appropriate balance between the rights of offenders and those of victims. So we are having several indicators now about the level of dismay towards the justice system expressed by British Columbians. 61% who tell us that the appropriate balance isn't being achieved, 74% who tell us that it's part of the problem for the situation in their community, and 88% who tell us that crimes go unreported, and they blame the fact that the justice system isn't acting particularly well for that to be the case. Now, we look into how many British Columbians think each entity is not doing enough to respond to addiction and mental health issues in their community. The police is at 49%, but everything else is significantly higher. 60% for municipal government, 61% for provincial governments, 66% for the federal government, and again, #1, Tied with the federal government, it's the justice system at 66%. So essentially 3 out of 5 British Columbians who believe that 4 very important entities aren't doing enough to respond to addiction and mental health issues in their community. We looked into several approaches to deal with the challenges at hand. First, crime and public safety. And this is an important component of something that definitely entails working for various levels of government in tandem. 87% who tell us they would like to change the bail system to ensure that repeat offenders remain in custody while awaiting trial. 87% who want harsher penalties, including incarceration for individuals convicted of multiple offenses, and 86% who want more police presence in areas where drugs are being sold illegally. High level of support as well for the federal government redeploying police forces to Canada's ports to tackle transnational organized crime. 83% who support enabling new legislation to allow for confiscating assets of people convicted of drug trafficking offenses. And 70% who believe that the provincial government should be providing financial support to businesses affected by crime, antisocial behavior, or civil disorder, such as shoplifting, graffiti, or vandalism. We also looked at some approaches related to prescription and non-prescription opioid drugs. More than 80% who believe that we need to build new and enhanced facilities for the care of people experiencing mental health problems. Again, when you have numbers this high, this is supported by British Columbians who might vote for any of the major parties running in this election. 83% who also want more education and awareness campaigns about drug use. We haven't had anything remarkably massive for the past 10 years when it comes to this particular aspect. 81% who want more spaces for drug rehabilitation, and 79% who like the idea of having housing units for individuals who are committed to entering and concluding a detoxification and recovery program. We also have more than 7 out of 10 who support reducing the prescription of opioids by medical professionals, allowing people addicted to opioids who have been charged with relatively minor crimes to avoid fines and incarceration if they voluntarily enter and conclude a detoxification and recovery program, and also establishing a publicly available data dashboard showing real-time statistics related to individuals in treatment, as well as the number and location of available beds. The least popular options, when you compare the numbers that we have already, 80%, 70% supporting specific ideas. 63% are in favor of establishing safe supply programs. It's a majority, but lower than the numbers that we had for some of the other issues that we tested. 53% want to set up more harm reduction strategies, such as legal supervised injection sites. So we're moving now towards something that is more contentious. And fewer than 2 out of 5 would actually go ahead with the decriminalization of all drugs for personal use. So here are some conclusions that give us a little bit more of a local aspect for the things that I talked about. We have more than 7 in 10 residents of 4 regions who think that the justice system does not achieve the appropriate balance between the rights of offenders and those of victims. The Interior is at 74%, Northern BC at 72%, Prince George and the Cariboo at 71%, and Vancouver Island also at 71%. 86% of residents of Vancouver Island say addiction to opioids is a health issue. This is higher than in any other region of BC. The perception that crime and violence are negatively impacting quality of life, which is something that we used to see in Metro Vancouver, is now highest in Prince George and the Cariboo at 80% and in Northern BC at 80%. Support for harsher penalties for repeat offenders reaches 91% in the Interior and 100% in Prince George and the Cariboo. And fewer than half of residents of all regions agree with decriminalizing all drugs for personal use. Support for this notion is highest in the Lower Mainland at 43% and lowest in Northern BC at 20%. Thank you. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks very much, Mario. Well, a lot of what you've heard will not be of a surprise to anyone, including our SOS members around the province. But the actual depth and scope of the sentiments behind these numbers is really quite staggering. It has surprised many of us. People are passionate about these issues, and they're getting more frustrated as time goes by. I'd like to introduce you to 3 of our SOS members so that they can share some of their thoughts about what's happening in their communities. First of all, Linda Andis, Executive Director and tireless advocate for the Metro Vancouver Crime Stoppers, would like to share a few of her thoughts. Linda.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Jess. For more than 40 years, Metro Vancouver Crime Stoppers has been working with communities and British Columbians to fight crime and to keep our streets safe. Every year we receive more than 4,000 tips. These are anonymous tips. The anonymity of those callers is guaranteed by the Supreme Court of Canada. And for 40 years, those tips have helped arrest criminals and recover property. The simple fact is, our police do a terrific job, but they cannot be everywhere. But we can, as British Columbians, help out in a large way. There are nearly 5.5 million of us now, and when we keep our eyes and ears open, we can assist police in doing their job. I've worked for Crime Stoppers now for nearly 12 years, and I have to say 2 really troubling numbers that jumped out at me from this poll. First, 88% of British Columbians say crimes are going unreported, and 68% say it's because they have lost confidence in the justice system. Taken together, those 2 numbers should make us all feel particularly that government needs to sit up and take notice. Those 2 numbers together are a big red flag. We need people to report crimes, even if you might think that nothing will come of it. By not reporting, we give the impression that the crime is going down when it really is not. You see, when you report a crime, it helps the data and information for our police that they need to, determine resources where resources should be deployed. The fact that so many of us think that why bother is incredibly troubling and something we need to turn around. Our justice system is the cornerstone of our democracy and our way of life in British Columbia. And when it is found wanting by the people who depend on it, it shouldn't be ignored. As Clint has already said, these numbers are a wake-up call for all of our political leaders and for all of us. British Columbians want less talk and more action. And they're here to, and they've made that clear to all of us in these polls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Report, right? As you've heard, SOS is not just about the Lower Mainland. I'd like to ask Tanya Finley, who is visiting with us today from Nelson, BC. She's a founder of N2, the neighborhood network, and the owner of Finley's Bar and Grill in Nelson, and a veteran of our Community Police Foundation. We'd like her to provide some of her reaction to what she's heard today. Tanya.
Thank you, everybody, for having us here. It is important when I look at this that these polls were taken from all over the region, and these results are actually staggering. Being part of SOS makes me feel safe and secure that all of our province is being heard, including the Kootenays, the Interior, and the North. The past 4 years, we have been fighting to protect our communities, to know that we are not alone, that businesses, job providers, neighbours across the province are feeling just as we do. Maybe this is a time where British Columbians don't have to feel afraid anymore. The results should be a wake-up call to everyone running to represent us in this election. Don't look at this as a criticism. Look at it as an opportunity to know that we will stand behind you as British Columbians, that the police, the fire, the ambulance, the nurses, the paramedics, the addicts, and the citizens don't want to live this way anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thirdly, I'd like to invite Karen Kowicki up to speak to us this morning Karen is from Nanaimo, and we all know that Nanaimo has been at the forefront of this story for some time, and Karen has been at the center of that. She's been very active with not only her neighborhood association, the Newcastle Community Association, but also NAPSA, the Nanaimo Area Public Safety Association, and she's a block watch captain. Karen.
Hello, thank you, Jess. The data that you're seeing today is a reflection of the conversations that have been going on in my community, my neighborhood, for a number of years now. Bearing witness to human suffering, to the experiencing the violence. It takes a toll on a community, and it changes people's opinions. And this data, unfortunately, reassures what we've already been experiencing. And I'm really hoping that this hard data is going to influence policy and make changes and help people. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Karen, and thanks for being here. Now, we'd like to invite a question from the media and take some time to try and answer them. There's a lot of data here, lots to get into, so please don't hesitate to ask questions. We're going to ask questions here in person, but also online. And after the Q&A, we'd be happy to remain for one-on-one interviews if you would wish. We'll start off with a question here on site, then we'll alternate with those media who are online to ensure that media from around the province have an opportunity to ask questions. If you are joining us remotely, please use the raise your hand feature on the program, and we'll prompt you to unmute your mute, and we'll make it your turn. So, questions? Pure.
Thank you. It's Ben Milger with CTV News. I think Linda Annis might be in the best position to answer this question. I'm only focused now on the first line here. The level of criminal activity in my community has increased in the past 4 years. And, you know, Mario went over the statistics. Linda, does that correspond to the actual data about crimes? Because that is hard data that we can measure versus this, which is a public opinion.
Unfortunately, crime is very, very underreported, and the stats right now, particularly in Surrey, show that many aspects of crime are down. We know, in fact, that that is not the case, that really what it comes down to is people are not reporting. They're just thinking that nothing is going to be done and that the crimes won't be solved. But as we know, it's very, very important that people do call in. It gives the police the tools to know where the criminal activity is happening. No reporting can't solve the crimes.
Just a follow-up to that, is there any hard data on underreporting numbers? And does that data delve into what types of crimes are underreported?
We don't know what crimes are not reported, but we do know, and we hear very, very often from both retailers and residents, not just in Surrey, but throughout the Lower Mainland, that why bother calling? Nothing is going to happen, that the criminal element will continue to do what they do, and it's a revolving door, unfortunately, with our justice system.
Grace Key with Global BC. Is SOS going to be throwing its support for any particular party?
Pardon me?
SOS going to be formally throwing its support for any particular party with the elections coming up?
SOS will remain nonpartisan. We will be assessing platforms versus our wish list for sure, but we will not be endorsing any one party.
And for London Drugs, I just wanted to know what the situation is with your Gastown location, and has it gotten so bad where you're considering not renewing the lease, and what are those discussions?
Thank you for the question, Grace. So London Drugs has made substantial commitments to the community, and those commitments include stores like in downtown Vancouver that lose millions of dollars a year due to direct theft, violence against employees, and the ongoing challenges we have of locking up product. As we've said before, we would be the very, very last thing that we would ever consider to close a store. And so we work very hard with whomever, political parties, Justice Administration, City of Vancouver Police, to prevent that from happening, and we're continuing to do that. So we, at this moment, will not be closing that store or any stores due to that. It is an option for us if we exhaust all other alternatives.
It's an option for you if you exhaust other alternatives.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you've seen that throughout the province. Not unique to London Drugs. Many small businesses have left or had to close in downtowns throughout the province. Some are well documented, like 7-Eleven having to close on Blanchard Street in Victoria, downtown Prince George, downtown Nanaimo, downtown Duncan. The story repeats itself. And one of the motivating factors for SOS to be created is to get government and the justice systems administration's officials' attention so we don't end up like a downtown San Francisco, downtown Portland, downtown Seattle, where they become deserts for the service industry because people feel unsafe. And we're very fearful that could happen. When the statistics say that 50% of all British Columbians feel unsafe in their communities, that should be a head-snapping wake-up call to the politicians about the survivability of downtowns throughout the province, big or small.
And one of the questions was there was a perception of prices going up because of theft. As a retailer, what is the reality of that, and what's the percentage that London Drugs has had to increase things because of theft?
Right. So every retailer, and Retail Council of Canada has studied this. Statistics Canada has looked at this. Our own SOS working group have looked at this. And depending on what statistics you wish to use, it's about 1.5 to 5%. It includes what percent you want to include. As an example, if it's direct theft only, that can be about 1.5 to 2.5% of pricing at a time of an affordability crisis. If you include the other factors, such as enhanced security measures, employees on leave due to violence against them, the threat of violence against them, the prices can range up to 5% as Canadians that we're paying. And that's a stat that's universal across Canada, not unique to British Columbia.
So that's what London Drugs is seeing, possibly those percentages.
We're a private company, so we don't disclose our actual numbers, but I can tell you that it ranges within those statistical norms of 1.5 to 5%, depending on what you include.
Grace, one of the other things that I think is really important to take note of is that so many areas, the businesses are suffering because of the lack of customers coming to that area in the community. That's really an area that's impacting business quite significantly. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Lauren Collins, Black Press Media. So you're nonpartisan, but for whoever forms government, how does SOS plan to engage with those politicians and the government to address your concerns?
So, in a matter of three weeks and a bit, we'll know who's going to be government. We will have assessed their platforms and how they address these issues. We have our data that you've seen today. So we think we could be a resource to any new government to provide them with good information as to what's required to resolve some of these issues. We have people with expertise in these areas, as does the government. But we'll be meeting with the government to encourage them to make the changes that we think are necessary.
You mentioned earlier that you'll be comparing the party platforms to your wish list. What is on your wish list?
Well, we have a number of things that you can well imagine on the wish list based on this research. Expanding treatment facilities for addictions and mental health is certainly a big one. Filling in the gaps when it comes to policing. There are 700 vacancies in the RCMP of full-time positions in BC alone. Filling those and making sure that police not only have the boots on the ground that they require, but the resources that they have and they require. It'll be items like that that really will make the difference, we believe. And there are numerous changes to the judicial system that we think are necessary. Some of that involves the federal government, but it can be influenced by the provincial government as well. We have judge positions that are vacant in British Columbia that make for a backlog of cases. We have the prosecutorial system where the prosecutors are telling us that they too have had long-standing vacancies in their system. That backs up the ability to deal with these cases. So there are, it's a long list, as you can well imagine. I think we all recognize many of the items that would be on that list, and we'll be encouraging government to take more action. We think that, government have talked about these issues for so long, we just think it's time to be more action-oriented.
And then once all of the party platforms are fully out and you have a chance to analyze them and compare them to that list, do you plan at any point to share whatever you see with the public? I mean, obviously, public safety is a very important key issue for your organization, the primary and only issue for your organization. Once the platforms are out, will you be saying this one checks the boxes, this one does not?
If I were really smart, I'd say stay tuned. But not being quite that smart, I would say that we're going to be more than willing to point out the gaps in platforms as it compares to what we think our needs lists are. We'll make those statements. Any further questions? Well, with that, we'd like to thank you for coming out this morning and spending some time with us. We'll certainly be around and available for one-on-one interviews if you wish. And again, this is a very early stages of this election. We hope to be back with you again and likely a number of times as we see how this election plays out and how these very important issues to our community are being addressed. Thank you very much.